April 19th, 1943. 15,000 feet above the Mediterranean Sea just west of Sicily. First Lieutenant Marcus Williams adjusted his oxygen mask inside the cramped cockpit of his F-4U Corsair, the familiar smell of hot oil and rubber filling his nostrils as he scanned the cloudless blue expanse. He was confident that his squadron would encounter minimal resistance on this escort mission. Intelligence had reported most Luftwaffe fighter groups had been relocated to the Eastern Front. Williams had no idea that within 7 days his name would be whispered with fear among the most decorated pilots of the German Air Force. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the extraordinary tale of how an overlooked pilot from Philadelphia would transform aerial combat tactics through a technique so unconventional that German aces considered it suicidal, only to find themselves outmaneuvered by what they could not believe possible. The morning briefing at Pantelleria Airfield had been routine. Captain Richard Montgomery, commanding officer of Marine Fighter Squadron 514, pointed to the large map covering the wall of the operations tent. "Gentlemen, today we're providing high cover for the bomber group hitting the fuel depot at Palermo. Intelligence suggests minimal opposition. Standard formation, standard protocols," Montgomery announced, his Boston accent still noticeable despite years of military service. Lieutenant Marcus Williams sat in the back row, towering over most of his fellow pilots, even while seated. At 6 feet 4 inches tall, Williams had initially been rejected for pilot training due to height restrictions. However, his exceptional performance in mechanical aptitude tests and the growing need for qualified pilots had earned him a waiver. Now, as one of only 7 African-American pilots in the Marines' Experimental Integrated Squadron program, Williams carried the weight of more than just his own reputation. "Any questions?" Montgomery asked, scanning the room. His eyes lingered briefly on Williams. "No, sir," came the unified response. "Wheels up in 30 minutes, dismissed." As the pilots filed out, Lieutenant James Porter sidled up to Williams. "Ready for another milk run, Marcus?" Porter asked, his Alabama drawl stretching out each syllable. Williams nodded. "Let's hope it stays that way." Porter was one of the few squadron members who had fully accepted Williams. Their friendship had begun over a shared passion for aircraft mechanics, with both men often working alongside the ground crews to fine-tune their Corsairs. "Heard anything from home?" Porter inquired as they walked toward the flight line. "Letter from my father last week," Williams replied. "Steel mills working around the clock. Says Philadelphia's bursting at the seams with war production." Before joining the Marines, Williams had worked alongside his father at the Hog Island shipyard, developing an intimate understanding of engineering principles that would later inform his approach to flying. His father had written with pride about the Liberty ships now sliding into the Delaware River, at the rate of 1 per week, each taking just 42 days to build. The conversation halted as they reached their aircraft. Williams performed his pre-flight check with methodical precision, running his hands along the Corsair's distinctive inverted gull wings. The ground crew chief, Sergeant Thomas O'Malley, approached with a clipboard. "She's in perfect shape, Lieutenant. Full tank, all systems checked," O'Malley reported. "Thanks, Sergeant. Any quirks I should know about?" Williams always asked this question, believing each aircraft had its own personality. "She pulls a little to the left on takeoff, but nothing you can't handle," O'Malley replied. "Oh, and I adjusted the trim tab like you asked." Williams nodded appreciatively. It was these small adjustments that could mean the difference between life and death in combat. He climbed into the cockpit, settling his large frame into the seat with practiced ease. The canopy closed with a solid thunk, sealing him into his own world of gauges, switches, and the reassuring rumble of the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine as it roared to life. The squadron took off in pairs, climbing to 15,000 feet before assembling in formation. Williams flew as Porter's wingman, positioned slightly behind and to the right. Through the crystal-clear Mediterranean air, Williams could see the silvery specks of the B-17 bomber formation several thousand feet below them. The huge aircraft, each carrying 3 tons of explosives destined for the fuel depot at Palermo, lumbered toward Sicily at 180 miles per hour. 30 minutes into the mission, Williams noticed something that didn't feel right. a glint of sunlight reflecting off metal, high above and to the east. He keyed his radio. "Wildcat leader, this is Wildcat 7. Possible bogeys, 2 o'clock high." Captain Montgomery's voice crackled in response. "Acknowledged, Wildcat 7. Keep your eyes peeled." Williams continued to scan the sky, focusing on the sector where he had seen the reflection. There it was again, not just one, but multiple aircraft, diving from above with the sun at their backs. A classic ambush tactic. "Wildcat leader, bandits 2 o'clock, coming down fast." "All Wildcats break formation," Montgomery commanded. "Engage at will." Williams pushed his stick forward and to the right, breaking away from Porter, as 6 Messerschmitt 109 fighters screamed past their position. The German pilots had expected to catch the American formation unaware, but Williams' early warning had given the Marines precious seconds to react. Banking hard, Williams pulled his Corsair into a tight turn, straining against the G-forces as he maneuvered to get behind one of the Messerschmitts. The German pilot, realizing he was being pursued, executed a textbook defensive move, pulling into a steep climb that would stall most pursuing aircraft. In that moment, Williams did something that no conventional pilot training would have suggested. Instead of following the Messerschmitt into its climb, or breaking off pursuit, he rolled his Corsair onto its back and pulled the stick toward his chest, diving inverted toward the sea. To any observer, it would have appeared that Williams had lost control or was attempting to flee. In reality, he was executing a maneuver he had developed during training flights, one that capitalized on the Corsair's unique characteristics. The German pilot, believing he had shaken his pursuer, leveled out and banked to rejoin the fight. That was when Williams, having completed his inverted dive and using the tremendous speed he had built up, pulled back into a vertical climb directly into the Messerschmitt's blind spot. The German never saw him coming. Williams' guns spoke briefly, and the Messerschmitt fell away, trailing smoke. "Wildcat 7. Splash 1, Williams reported calmly, already searching for his next target. The entire dogfight lasted less than 10 minutes. The Marines claimed 4 German aircraft destroyed with 2 probables, losing one of their own. The bomber formation continued to Palermo unscathed, delivering their payload to the fuel depot with devastating accuracy. Back at Pantelleria, the debriefing was animated, with pilots talking over each other to describe the engagement. Captain Montgomery raised his hands for silence. "Gentlemen, good work today. The bomber group commander sends his thanks." He turned to Williams. "Lieutenant Williams, that was some fancy flying. Care to explain what exactly you did out there?" All eyes turned to Williams. For a moment he hesitated, aware of the scrutiny. Then he stood and walked to the blackboard. "It's something I've been practicing, sir. I call it the inverted dive recovery." He sketched a quick diagram. "When a bandit climbs, the conventional response is to follow or break off. But the Corsair has a significant weight advantage over the 109. If you invert and dive, you build up tremendous speed." He drew a curved line representing the maneuver. "The trick is timing the pull-up to place yourself directly in the enemy's blind spot as he levels out from his climb." Montgomery studied the diagram. "That's unorthodox, Lieutenant, and risky, but it clearly worked." He addressed the room. "Study this, gentlemen. It might save your lives." That evening, as Williams sat writing in his journal, Porter dropped into the chair across from him. "That move today was something else, Marcus," he said. "Where did you learn that?" Williams set down his pencil. "Didn't learn it anywhere. Figured it out myself." Porter raised an eyebrow. "Come on, there must be more to it than that." Williams was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. His relationship with Porter had grown over months of shared missions, but some experiences were difficult to articulate. "Back in Philadelphia, I used to watch the peregrine falcons that nested on City Hall," he finally said. "They hunt by diving from above, but sometimes when their prey spots them and climbs, they do this roll and dive maneuver to build speed, then pull up underneath. Nature's fighter pilots," he shrugged. "I just wondered if the Corsair could do something similar. And you just tried it, without knowing if it would work." Porter seemed incredulous. "Calculated risk," Williams replied. "I tested it gradually during training flights. The Corsair can handle forces that would tear apart a Messerschmitt. That's the advantage. Porter shook his head in admiration. Well, it worked beautifully. You should name it after yourself, you know. The Williams maneuver has a nice ring to it. Williams smiled but shook his head. I'll stick with inverted dive. Less conspicuous. The following morning, Williams was summoned to Captain Montgomery's office. The captain was not alone. Beside his desk stood Colonel James Everett, the group commander from the mainland base at Tunis. Lieutenant Williams, reporting as ordered, sir, Williams said, saluting sharply. At ease, Lieutenant, Montgomery replied, returning the salute. Colonel Everett wanted to meet you after hearing about yesterday's engagement. Everett, a tall, lean man with piercing blue eyes, studied Williams with undisguised curiosity. That was impressive flying, Lieutenant. Captain Montgomery tells me you've developed this technique yourself. Yes, sir. It's based on observations of hunting birds, adapted to the Corsair's capabilities. Everett nodded slowly. I see. And could other pilots learn this maneuver? With practice, yes, sir, though it requires a certain feel for the aircraft's limits. Excellent. Everett turned to Montgomery. Captain, I want Lieutenant Williams to conduct training sessions for the other pilots in his squadron. If this technique is as effective as it appears, we need to spread it through our fighter groups. Yes, sir, Montgomery agreed. There's more, Everett continued. Intelligence has intercepted Luftwaffe communications, indicating they're bringing in some of their top aces from the Russian front. Apparently our bombing campaign is hitting them harder than we thought. We can expect increased resistance, starting with an elite group of experienced pilots arriving tomorrow or the next day. Williams felt a tightening in his stomach. The milk runs were about to become much more dangerous. Lieutenant, Everett addressed Williams directly, your technique might give us the edge we need. How quickly can you train the others? We can start today, sir. Basic principles can be taught quickly, but mastery will take time. Do what you can, Everett ordered. Time is not on our side. That afternoon, Williams found himself standing before his fellow pilots, explaining the principles of the inverted dive maneuver. Some were skeptical, others eager to try. Porter, always supportive, had already begun practicing the technique during the morning patrol. The key is to anticipate the enemy's recovery from his climb, Williams explained. How you need to time your pull-up to place yourself in his blind spot, just below and behind. Lieutenant Maxwell, a former college football player from Texas, raised his hand. Seems like a good way to get yourself into a flat spin, Williams. It would be in most aircraft, Williams acknowledged, but the Corsair's weight distribution and wing design make it more stable in the recovery phase. That said, you need to maintain precise control of your roll rate and pull force. For the next 2 hours, Williams detailed the mechanics of the maneuver, using diagrams and hand gestures to illustrate the complex three-dimensional movements. By the end of the session, most of the pilots were eager to try it in the air. We'll practice tomorrow morning, Montgomery announced. Empty bellies over the water where it's safer. That night, German transport aircraft landed at airfields across Sicily, delivering a group of decorated Luftwaffe pilots who had been hastily reassigned from the Eastern Front. Among them was Major Klaus Hoffmann, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, credited with 78 aerial victories against Soviet pilots. Hoffmann, a veteran of the Spanish Civil War and the Battle of Britain, had been pulled from a well-deserved leave to address the American bombing threat to German logistics in the Mediterranean. As he stepped from the Junkers 5-2 transport at Comiso Airfield, he breathed in the mild Sicilian air, a pleasant change from the brutal cold of the Russian winter. Major Hoffmann, welcome to Sicily, greeted Hauptmann Werner Schroeder, the local squadron commander. Your pilots are being billeted in the officers' quarters. Your aircraft is ready for inspection. Hoffmann nodded curtly. At 32, he was considered old for a fighter pilot, but his experience made him invaluable. What is the current situation? As they walked toward the flight line, Schroeder briefed him on recent engagements. The Americans have increased their bombing raids significantly. Their fighter escorts are primarily Corsairs from a marine squadron based at Pantelleria. Yesterday, we lost 4 aircraft attempting to intercept a bombing raid on the Palermo fuel depot. 4 aircraft against what opposition? Hoffmann asked sharply. Schroeder hesitated. 12 Corsairs. Our pilots reported unusual tactics from one aircraft in particular. Hoffmann stopped walking. Explain. According to Lieutenant Bauer, the only pilot to return from the forward element, one American pilot executed a maneuver he had never seen before. An inverted dive followed by a vertical climb that placed him perfectly positioned for a kill shot. Bauer said it happened so quickly, there was no time to counter. Hoffman frowned. Innovation in aerial combat was rare, but could be devastating when effectively employed. The Soviets had developed the pancake formation that had cost the Luftwaffe dozens of aircraft before countermeasures were developed. If the Americans were now deploying new tactics, they needed to be understood and neutralized quickly. "I want to meet this Lieutenant Bauer immediately," Hoffman ordered, "and arrange for reconnaissance flights over the American base at Pantelleria. I need to know what we're facing." Dawn of April 20th found Williams leading a training flight of 6 Corsairs over the Mediterranean. The sea below was calm, its surface reflecting the early morning sunlight like hammered silver. "All right, gentlemen," Williams spoke into his radio. "We'll practice the maneuver one at a time. Lieutenant Porter will demonstrate first, with me as his target. Watch carefully." Williams climbed to 18,000 feet, then leveled off. Porter positioned his Corsair 3,000 feet below. On Williams's signal, Porter began a pursuit climb, simulating an attacking Messerschmitt. Williams executed a steep climb as if attempting to escape. At the critical moment, Williams pushed his throttle forward, gaining speed in his climb. Porter, following textbook procedure, continued his pursuit climb, expecting Williams to stall or break away. Instead, Williams suddenly rolled his aircraft inverted and pulled into a diving turn that carried him in a wide arc, away from Porter's line of sight. Porter, momentarily confused, leveled out at the top of his climb, scanning for Williams. The demonstration was supposed to end there, with Porter acknowledging that he had lost visual contact. Instead, the pilots watching from below saw Williams complete his diving turn, convert his speed into a vertical climb, and smoothly slide into position directly behind Porter's Corsair. "Guns would be effective now," Williams announced calmly over the radio. Porter's voice held a note of awe. "I never saw you coming, not even a glimpse." "That's the point," Williams replied. "Lieutenant Maxwell, you're next. Take Porter's position." By the end of the 2-hour session, each pilot had attempted the maneuver at least once. Only Porter and Lieutenant Rodriguez, a former acrobatic pilot from California, had executed it successfully on their first try. The others struggled with the precise timing and control required. "Don't be discouraged," Williams told them as they formed up for the return to base. "It took me dozens of practice runs to perfect it. We'll continue tomorrow." Unknown to the Marines, their training session had been observed by a German reconnaissance aircraft flying at extreme altitude. Photographs taken with telescopic lenses captured the unusual maneuvers, providing Major Hoffman with his first glimpse of what his pilots would be facing. That afternoon, Hoffman gathered his pilots in the briefing room at Comiso. 14 men, each with at least 15 confirmed victories, studied the grainy photographs spread across the table. "The American is inverting during a dive," Hoffman explained, pointing to a sequence of images. "Then using his speed to climb vertically into the blind spot. Unconventional, but potentially effective if executed properly." Oberleutnant Karl Weber, a 25-year-old ace with 28 victories, looked skeptical. "It seems unnecessarily complex, Herr Major. Why not simply execute a standard Immelmann turn?" "Because a standard maneuver is predictable," Hoffman replied. He tapped the photograph, "this would be unexpected, and in combat surprise is often decisive." Lieutenant Bauer, who had witnessed the tactic firsthand, nodded in agreement. "It happened exactly as these photos show. Frank had no idea the American was there until it was too late." Hoffman straightened up. "Gentlemen, tomorrow we fly against these Marines. We will use our standard 4-finger formation, but be alert for this diving tactic. If you see an American roll inverted, do not follow his climb before the roll. Instead, brake hard in the opposite direction of his roll. He cannot adjust his dive quickly enough to follow." The pilots nodded, absorbing the instruction. Hoffman dismissed them with a reminder. "Study these photographs tonight to know what to look for. These Americans are innovative, but we have experience on our side." As the Germans prepared their countermeasures, Williams sat in his quarters, writing a detailed analysis of the day's training in his notebook. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Captain Montgomery stepped inside, his expression serious. "Williams." Intelligence just came through. "Reconnaissance spotted a group of transport aircraft landing at Comiso yesterday. We believe they've brought in reinforcements." Williams set down his pencil. "Experienced pilots." "The best," Montgomery confirmed grimly. "Intelligence thinks it might be Hoffman's group from the Russian front." Williams had heard of Klaus Hoffmann. All fighter pilots knew the names of the top aces. Hoffmann was a tactician as well as a skilled pilot, known for analyzing and countering enemy techniques. "They'll have seen us practicing today," Williams realized aloud. Montgomery nodded. "Almost certainly. We had a high-altitude contact briefly on radar, gone before we could scramble to investigate." "So they know about the inverted dive?" "Probably. But knowing about a tactic and countering it are two different things." Montgomery sat on the edge of Williams' bunk. "How do you think they'll respond?" Williams considered the question carefully. "If I were them, I'd instruct pilots to break away the moment they see the inverting roll. Make a hard turn opposite the direction of the roll, where the diving aircraft can't follow easily." "Can we counter that counter?" Montgomery asked. A slow smile spread across Williams' face. "Yes, sir. I believe we can." The next morning, April 21st, brought clear skies and perfect visibility. Williams led a flight of 8 Corsairs providing escort for a group of medium bombers targeting German supply lines near Messina. Intelligence had reported increased Luftwaffe activity in the sector overnight. "All Wildcats stay sharp," Williams advised over the radio as they crossed the Sicilian coastline. "Remember what we discussed. If they've studied our new tactic, they'll be ready for it. So we use the counter-counter." The counter-counter was Williams' adaptation, developed overnight. If the Germans broke away from the inverted dive, the American pilot would continue the dive longer, building extreme speed, then use that energy for a climbing turn that would place them back on the German's tail from an unexpected angle. 20 minutes into the mission, radar operators at Pantelleria detected multiple aircraft rising from airfields across eastern Sicily. At least 16 German fighters were climbing to intercept the American formation. "Wildcats, bandits approaching from the east," Montgomery warned. "Expect contact in 3 minutes." Williams scanned the sky intently, searching for the telltale glint of sunlight on metal. There, a flash to the east slightly above their altitude, multiple aircraft approaching in a tight formation. "Visual contact 10 o'clock high," Williams reported. "Looks like 109's standard four-finger formation." The German formation approached with precision, splitting into smaller elements as they neared the American bombers. Williams recognized the tactic. They would attempt to break through the fighter screen to attack the vulnerable bombers. "All Wildcats, engage," Montgomery ordered. "Protect the bombers at all costs." Williams pushed his throttle forward, climbing to intercept the nearest German element. He found himself approaching a Messerschmitt flown with exceptional skill. The German pilot executed a series of quick, precise maneuvers, attempting to shake Williams while working his way toward the bombers. Recognizing an opportunity to test his counter-counter tactic, Williams climbed sharply, as if attempting to get above the Messerschmitt. The German pilot, apparently briefed on Williams' usual tactic, watched for the inverted roll that would precede the inverted dive. When Williams rolled his Corsair onto its back, the Messerschmitt immediately broke hard right, exactly as Williams had predicted. Instead of pulling into the standard diving arc, Williams continued his inverted dive for several seconds longer, building tremendous speed. Then, using that energy, he pulled into a climbing right turn that placed him perfectly on the German's tail as the Messerschmitt completed its evasive turn. The German pilot, believing he had successfully countered the American tactic, was completely surprised when Williams appeared in his mirror. A short burst from Williams's 650 caliber machine guns tore into the Messerschmitt's engine. The German aircraft shuddered, then rolled inverted as the pilot bailed out. "Wildcat 7, splash 1, Williams reported, already searching for his next target. Across the sky, the other Marine pilots were employing variations of Williams' tactics with varying degrees of success. Porter had claimed one victory using the standard inverted dive against a German pilot who hadn't been briefed on the counter. Lieutenant Rodriguez had executed a beautiful counter-counter maneuver, downing a Messerschmitt that had attempted to evade. In total, the Marines claimed 6 German aircraft destroyed for the loss of 2 of their own. The bombers had successfully hit their targets and were returning to base. As Williams led the remaining Corsairs back to Pantelleria, he reflected on the engagement. The Germans had been prepared, but not prepared enough. Their counter to the inverted dive had been predictable, allowing for the development of the counter-counter. But Williams knew this aerial chess game would continue. The Germans would analyze today's losses and develop new tactics for the next encounter. At Comiso Airfield, Major Hoffmann debriefed his pilots with barely controlled fury. 6 aircraft lost, including 2 flown by pilots with more than 20 victories each. "The American has modified his tactic," Hoffmann concluded after listening to the reports. "He anticipated our counter and extended his dive to catch Müller as he completed his evasive turn." Oberleutnant Weber, who had narrowly escaped after being caught in a similar maneuver, nodded grimly. "He's thinking 2 moves ahead, Herr Major. By the time we recognize the beginning of his maneuver, he's already planned for our response." Hoffmann paced the length of the room. "Then we must change the game entirely. Tomorrow we will not react to his maneuvers at all. Instead, we will force him to react to us." The German strategy for the next day involved using their superior numbers to overwhelm the American formation. While the Marines had shown greater tactical innovation, the Luftwaffe could bring 3 times as many aircraft to bear. Hoffmann planned to deploy 24 Messerschmitts against the expected 12 to 16 Corsairs. April 22nd dawned with a thin layer of high clouds, creating diffuse lighting that made spotting aircraft at a distance more difficult. Williams, now officially recognized as the squadron's tactical leader, briefed the pilots before their mission to escort heavy bombers targeting the port facilities at Syracuse. Intelligence reports increased German activity across all Sicilian airfields, Williams explained, pointing to the map. "We can expect significant opposition today. They'll likely try to overwhelm us with numbers." Captain Montgomery stepped forward. "In light of yesterday's success, Headquarters has assigned 2 additional squadrons to join us. 16 Corsairs from VMF 513 and 12 Warhawks from an Army Air Force squadron will rendezvous with us here." He marked a point over the Mediterranean. "That changes the equation," Williams observed, feeling a surge of optimism. With 40 aircraft in total, they would have numerical parity with whatever the Germans could scramble on short notice. The mission began routinely enough. The Marine squadron took off from Pantelleria, climbing to 18,000 feet to rendezvous with the other American fighters. The combined force then formed a protective screen around the bomber formation as it approached Sicily. German radar operators detected the large American formation while it was still over the Mediterranean. At Comiso and other Sicilian airfields, alarm sirens wailed as pilots rushed to their aircraft. Major Hoffmann, having anticipated a large American force, had prepared accordingly. 36 Messerschmitts from 3 different Gruppen were ready to intercept. "All wildcats, bandits approaching from multiple vectors," Montgomery warned as the first German aircraft appeared on the horizon. "Looks like we've got company from every direction." Williams studied the German formations with a practiced eye. They were approaching in what appeared to be standard intercept patterns, but something felt wrong. The formations were too spread out, almost inviting the Americans to break their defensive screen. "It's a trap," Williams realized suddenly. "Captain, they want us to split our forces. If we chase after individual groups, they'll slip through and hit the bombers." Montgomery quickly grasped Williams' concern. "All wildcats maintain formation integrity. Do not pursue beyond visual range of the bomber stream. Let them come to us." The battle that ensued was the largest air engagement over Sicily to that date. German fighters approached from multiple directions, probing the American defenses. Each time a group of Corsairs moved to intercept, the Messerschmitts would withdraw, trying to draw the Americans away from the bombers. Williams held his position, directing other pilots to do the same. "They're trying to pull us out of position," he reminded them. "Stay disciplined." Major Hoffmann, leading the largest German formation, watched the American response with grudging admiration. They had not fallen for his feint. Now he would have to commit to a direct assault. "All units execute Plan 2, he ordered over the radio. The scattered German formations suddenly converged, concentrating their attack on one section of the American defensive screen. 20 Messerschmitts diving from multiple angles overwhelmed 8 Corsairs, creating a gap in the coverage. "They're breaking through Sector 4, Porter called urgently. "Williams, they're heading for the bombers." Williams made a split-second decision. "Wildcat 7 through 12, follow me. We're closing that gap." Banking hard, Williams led 5 Corsairs in a high-speed intercept course toward the German breakthrough. They would be outnumbered 4-1, but had the advantage of altitude and the element of surprise. As the German fighters descended toward the bomber formation, Williams led his section in a steep dive from above. The Messerschmitts, focused on the bombers, failed to notice the Corsairs until they were upon them. In the chaos that followed, Williams executed 3 perfect inverted dive maneuvers in quick succession, claiming 2 German aircraft confirmed destroyed and 1 probable. Porter added another victory, while Lieutenant Rodriguez claimed 2 more. The sudden appearance of Williams' section disrupted the German attack completely. Forced to defend themselves, the Messerschmitts broke off their attack on the bombers, scattering in multiple directions. "Push the advantage," Williams called. "Don't let them regroup." For 15 frantic minutes, individual dogfights raged across the sky as the battle disintegrated into a swirling melee. Williams found himself facing a Messerschmitt flown with exceptional skill, quick, precise maneuvers that spoke of vast experience. After several attempts to gain an advantage, Williams recognized he was dueling with a master. The German pilot anticipated each move, countering effectively. When Williams attempted his inverted dive, the German executed a perfect defensive spiral that prevented Williams from getting into firing position. Finally, low on fuel and ammunition, both pilots broke off the engagement with a mutual waggle of wings, the fighter pilot's salute to a worthy opponent. Only later would Williams learn he had been dueling with Major Klaus Hoffmann himself. The final tally for the day was remarkable: 11 German aircraft destroyed with 4 American losses. The bombers had successfully hit their targets, inflicting severe damage on the port facilities at Syracuse. More importantly, the Germans had failed to develop an effective counter to Williams' tactics when executed properly. That evening, as Williams sat in the officers' club writing in his journal, a communications officer approached with a message form. "Lieutenant Williams, urgent message from headquarters, sir." Williams opened the folded paper and read, "Intelligence intercept. Stop German signals reference Black American pilot. Stop inverted dive tactic, causing significant losses. Stop Hoffmann requests additional experienced pilots. Stop congratulations on success. Stop continue current tactics stop." Williams folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. The Germans had identified him specifically. That was both flattering and concerning. If they were focusing on him personally, they might develop tactics specifically designed to counter his approach. The next day, April 23rd, brought unexpected weather. A spring storm moved in from the north, bringing low clouds and rain that grounded all aircraft. Williams used the opportunity to refine his tactical ideas and train the newer pilots in simulator exercises. By April 24th, the weather had cleared enough for limited operations. Intelligence reported that the Germans had received reinforcements. Another dozen experienced pilots transferred from the Russian front. The aerial chess match would continue with higher stakes. The mission that day was a fighter sweep over eastern Sicily, designed to draw out the German defenders and engage them away from the valuable bombers. Williams led 16 Corsairs, divided into 4 flights of 4 aircraft each. As they crossed the Sicilian coastline, German radar operators tracked them carefully. At Comiso, Major Hoffmann briefed his pilots one final time. "The American formation is approaching from the west," he explained, pointing to the map. "They are flying without bomber support, a fighter sweep intended to engage us. We will oblige them, but on our terms." Hoffmann had developed a new counter to Williams's tactics. Instead of attempting to evade the inverted dive, his pilots would use their superior numbers to set traps. One aircraft would serve as bait, while another would position itself to attack any American attempting the signature maneuver. "Remember," Hoffmann concluded, "we are not fighting just any opponent. We are fighting a pilot who thinks 3-dimensionally. We must do the same. The German formation took off, 24 aircraft climbing to 20,000 feet, higher than the approaching Americans. Hoffmann's plan was to use the altitude advantage to control the engagement. Williams spotted the German formation while still 10 miles out. Wildcats, bandits, 12 o'clock high, looks like they want to play today. The Americans continued their approach, watching as the German formation began a series of maneuvers. Rather than diving to engage, the Messerschmitts maintained their altitude advantage, forcing the Americans to climb if they wanted to fight. "They're baiting us," Williams observed. "If we climb, they'll have the advantage." "So what's the play?" Porter asked over the radio. Williams studied the German formation for a moment longer, then made his decision. "We split. Flights 1 and 2 maintain course. Flights 3 and 4 drop to deck level and circle behind. When they commit to us, hit them from below." It was a risky strategy. By dividing his forces, Williams was temporarily giving the Germans an even greater numerical advantage against Flights 1 and 2. But if the Germans committed to the attack, Flights 3 and 4 would have a perfect position to strike from below. The plan worked initially. As Flights 1 and 2 continued their approach, Flights 3 and 4 dropped to 2,000 feet, using the terrain to mask their movement as they circled behind the German position. The Germans, focused on the main American formation, failed to notice the missing aircraft. When the distance closed to 5 miles, the Germans finally committed. 12 Messerschmitts dove toward the 8 Corsairs of Flights 1 and 2, while the remaining 12 maintained altitude as a reserve force. Williams keyed his radio. "Flight 3, Flight 4, execute now." From below and behind, 8 Corsairs suddenly appeared, climbing steeply toward the 12 German aircraft still at altitude. Caught by surprise, the German reserve scattered, several pilots diving to escape the unexpected threat. In the confusion, Williams led Flight 1 in a climbing turn to engage the diving Germans. As they met in a head-on pass, Williams selected a target and executed a rolling scissors maneuver, forcing the German pilot to overshoot. As the Messerschmitt flashed past, Williams rolled inverted and pulled into his now famous dive, building speed before pulling up directly into the German's blind spot. But this time, something was different. As Williams completed his maneuver and prepared to fire, a second Messerschmitt appeared in his peripheral vision, diving toward him with guns blazing. The German trap had been sprung. Williams reacted instinctively, pushing his stick hard over and stomping on the rudder pedal. The Corsair slewed sideways in a maneuver that stressed both aircraft and pilot to their limits. Tracers from the Germans' guns passed harmlessly through the space Williams had occupied a split second earlier. Now Williams found himself in a defensive position, with 2 skilled German pilots working in concert to box him in. Each time he attempted to maneuver against one, the other would move to counter. "Wildcat 7, you've got 2 on your tail," Porter called urgently. "Brake right, I'm coming in." Williams pushed his aircraft into a tight right turn, feeling the G-forces crushing him into his seat. The Messerschmitts followed, one high, one low, maintaining perfect position to counter any move he might make. Porter dove into the fight from above, guns chattering as he targeted the higher German aircraft. His aim was true, sending the Messerschmitt into a spinning descent, trailing smoke and flames. With only one opponent remaining, Williams was able to employ his inverted dive to full effect. The German pilot, attempting to climb away, found Williams suddenly appearing in his blind spot. A short burst from Williams' guns shredded the Messerschmitt's control surfaces, sending it tumbling toward the Sicilian countryside. Across the engagement area, similar scenarios played out. The German trap had been well conceived, but poorly executed due to the unexpected appearance of Flights 3 and 4. By the time the engagement ended, the Americans had claimed 9 German aircraft destroyed, with 3 Corsairs lost. As Williams led the surviving aircraft back to Pantelleria, he reflected on the evolving nature of the aerial chess match. The Germans were learning, adapting their tactics to counter his innovations. He would need to stay one step ahead. April 25th brought clear weather and another mission. This time, Williams led 12 Corsairs, escorting a reconnaissance aircraft photographing German positions around Messina. Intelligence had reported that Major Hoffmann's group had received additional reinforcements, bringing their strength back up to 36 aircraft. The mission proceeded normally, until the reconnaissance aircraft completed its run over Messina. As it turned for home, radar operators at Pantelleria detected a large formation of German fighters rising to intercept. All wildcats, bandits approaching from the south, Montgomery warned. Count is 20 plus. Looks like they waited until we were headed home to pounce. Williams studied the tactical situation. The reconnaissance aircraft was valuable, carrying photographic intelligence that could significantly impact upcoming operations. It had to be protected at all costs. All wildcats, form tight screen around the reconnaissance aircraft, Williams ordered. They're coming for the photos. We don't let them through. The German formation approached with methodical precision. This time, they had adopted a new formation, pairs of aircraft flying in close coordination, designed specifically to counter Williams' tactics. As the engagement began, Williams quickly recognized that the Germans had developed an effective response to the inverted dive. Each time an American pilot attempted the maneuver, the German wingman would position himself to attack during the vulnerable recovery phase. All wildcats, they've countered the dive, Williams called. Switch to standard tactics. But even as he gave the order, Williams was thinking ahead. The Germans had adapted to his innovation. Now he needed to innovate again. Studying their paired formation, he noticed a potential weakness. The German pilots were flying in such close coordination that they had limited freedom to maneuver independently. "Porter, on me," Williams called. "We're going to split that pair at 2 o'clock. Williams and Porter approached the German pair from slightly below. As they closed the distance, Williams suddenly pulled up sharply, appearing to attempt a head-on attack against the lead German aircraft. The German responded predictably, braking hard left while his wingman broke right, exactly as Williams had hoped. "You take right, I've got left," Williams told Porter. With the German pair separated, their coordinated defense fell apart. Williams executed a modified version of his inverted dive, using a shallower angle that allowed for quicker recovery. The German pilot, expecting the standard deep dive, was caught by surprise when Williams appeared on his tail much sooner than anticipated. The Messerschmitt fell away, trailing smoke, as Williams already searched for his next target. Across the battlefield, other Marine pilots began emulating the modified technique, with increasing success. By the end of the engagement, the Marines had claimed 7 German aircraft destroyed for the loss of 2 Corsairs. More importantly, the reconnaissance aircraft escaped unscathed, its valuable intelligence secured. April 26th marked the 6th consecutive day of combat operations for Williams and his squadron. The strain was beginning to show, with pilots exhibiting signs of combat fatigue. Captain Montgomery had requested a rotation of personnel, but headquarters had delayed approval, citing the critical nature of ongoing operations. The mission that day was another bomber escort, targeting German airfields across eastern Sicily, in an attempt to reduce the Luftwaffe's ability to contest the skies. Williams led 16 Corsairs, providing high cover for 24 B-17 bombers. As they approached the target area, radar reported multiple German formations rising to intercept. Intelligence estimated at least 40 aircraft, the largest German response to date. "They're throwing everything they have at us," Montgomery observed grimly. Williams nodded. "They're getting desperate. Our bombing is hurting them badly." The German formations appeared on the horizon, approaching from multiple directions. Williams recognized the tactical problem immediately. With German aircraft approaching from different vectors, the American fighters would be forced to split their attention, potentially creating gaps in the defensive screen. "All Wildcats maintain discipline," Williams instructed. "Flights 1 and 2, take North Quadrant. Flights 3 and 4, South Quadrant. Do not pursue beyond visual range of the bombers." The battle that followed was the most intense of the campaign. German fighters pressed their attacks from all directions, accepting heavy losses in their determination to break through to the bombers. Williams found himself constantly switching targets, using his inverted dive and its variations to claim 3 confirmed victories in the space of 15 minutes. Porter, flying as Williams' wingman, added 2 more victories. Together they anchored the northern defensive screen, preventing multiple German breakthrough attempts. The turning point came when a formation of 6 Messerschmitts, led by what appeared to be a senior officer, attempted a coordinated thrust through the center of the American formation. Williams recognized the opportunity and the threat simultaneously. "Flight 1 on me," he called, leading 4 Corsairs in a high-speed intercept. The ensuing dogfight was brief but violent. Williams engaged the lead Messerschmitt, immediately recognizing the exceptional skill of its pilot. The German executed a series of textbook defensive maneuvers, each one calculated to draw Williams out of position. Rather than following the Germans' lead, Williams employed his latest variation of the inverted dive, a shallower angle with a quicker recovery, followed by a rolling climb that placed him at an oblique angle to the Germans' flight path. The Messerschmitt pilot, expecting Williams to appear directly behind him, was caught by surprise when bullets tore into his aircraft from a 45-degree angle. The German aircraft shuddered under the impact, then rolled inverted as the pilot bailed out. Later intelligence would confirm that Williams had shot down Major Klaus Hoffmann himself, dealing a severe blow to German morale and tactical leadership. With Hoffmann down, the German attack faltered. Lacking coordinated direction, the remaining aircraft pressed their attacks individually, making them easier to counter. By the time the bombers reached their targets, dropping their payloads with devastating accuracy on 3 major Luftwaffe airfields, the Germans had lost 15 aircraft. The Americans lost 5. As Williams led the remaining Corsairs back to Pantelleria, exhaustion set in. He had been flying and fighting for 6 consecutive days, claiming a total of 15 confirmed victories. His inverted dive technique and its variations had changed the nature of aerial combat in the Mediterranean theater, forcing the Germans to commit their best pilots and still failing to counter it effectively. April 27th brought welcome news. Headquarters had approved a rotation of personnel. Williams and the original pilots of VMF 514 would be given 3 days of rest while replacement pilots took over combat operations. During the debriefing, Colonel Everett personally congratulated Williams and his squadron. "Gentlemen, in 1 week, you have achieved what an entire fighter group couldn't accomplish in a month. 15 enemy aircraft destroyed by Lieutenant Williams alone, with another 23 credited to the squadron as a whole. The Germans have been forced to transfer some of their best pilots from the Russian front, weakening their position there and buying our Soviet allies valuable time." Everett turned to Williams. "Lieutenant, your inverted dive technique has proven revolutionary. Intelligence reports that German pilots now break off engagement immediately when facing Corsairs, for fear of encountering what they're calling the Black Death dive." Williams winced slightly at the nickname, but Everett continued, "I've recommended you for the Distinguished Flying Cross, and headquarters has approved. The citation is being prepared as we speak." The assembled pilots applauded, none more enthusiastically than Porter, who had witnessed Williams' innovation from the beginning. That evening, as Williams sat alone on the airfield perimeter, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of gold and crimson, Porter joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "Quite a week," Porter commented, handing Williams a cup. 15 victories. That makes you the highest-scoring Marine ace in the theater." Williams sipped his coffee, feeling the weight of accomplishment and responsibility in equal measure. "It wasn't just me, James, it was all of us working together." "True enough, but it was your technique that made the difference." Porter gestured toward the distant outline of Sicily. "You changed the game, Marcus. The Germans had no answer for it." Williams was quiet for a moment, thinking about the men who hadn't returned, both American and German. "They adapted quickly," he finally said. "That paired formation was clever. If we hadn't modified our approach, they might have turned the tables. But we did adapt." "Because you saw the pattern and adjusted." Porter studied his friend's profile in the fading light. "That's what makes you different. You're always thinking ahead, seeing the chess game 3 moves deep." "I had good teachers," Williams replied. "My father always said that the difference between surviving and thriving was anticipation. See the problem before it becomes a problem, he'd tell me. That applies to engineering and apparently to aerial combat as well." As darkness fell, the 2 pilots sat in companionable silence, watching the first stars appear above the Mediterranean. In 3 days, they would return to combat, facing whatever new tactics the Germans might develop. But for now, they had earned their rest. In the decades that followed, the inverted dive would be studied at flight schools around the world, entering the standard repertoire of fighter tactics. Marcus Williams would go on to claim a total of 28 aerial victories before the end of the war, receive a commission in the newly independent Air Force, and eventually rise to the rank of colonel, helping to integrate the service and train new generations of pilots. The week in April 1943, when a single innovative maneuver changed the course of the air war in the Mediterranean, would be documented in military history textbooks and aviation journals. Williams' contribution would be recognized not just for the victories it achieved, but for demonstrating that innovation and adaptation could overcome even the most experienced opposition. As German records captured after the war would reveal, Major Klaus Hoffmann's final report to Berlin contained a grudging assessment. The Americans' inverted dive technique represents a fundamental advance in aerial combat tactics. Despite our best efforts, we have been unable to develop an effective counter. I recommend immediate dissemination of information regarding this technique to our own pilots for potential adoption. Higher recognition would come in 1998, when the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum unveiled a special exhibit dedicated to aerial combat innovations, featuring a detailed analysis of the inverted dive and its impact on fighter tactics. By then, computer simulations could demonstrate precisely why the maneuver had been so effective against the Messerschmitt 109, a combination of the Corsair's unique characteristics and Williams' understanding of three-dimensional combat space. A quote from Williams, recorded during an interview in 1985, served as the exhibit's centerpiece. "I didn't invent anything new. I just watched how nature solved the same problem. Those falcons in Philadelphia taught me everything I needed to know about air combat. All I did was translate bird dynamics into aircraft dynamics and trust that my Corsair could handle what I was asking it to do." And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.